Well, hello and welcome all. My name is Mike Marsh. I'm the product manager for Dragonfly at ORS. Some of you may know me on Twitter as Dragonfly Wizard. Thank you for joining me today. Those of you that are streaming this on demand from our website or from YouTube, where this was recorded live, you have the benefit of a video title, and so you probably know what this presentation is about. Those of you watching me live right now in this stream may be wondering, what is Mike going to talk about today? The only thing we've told you so far is that we have something new to announce, that we want to make your scientific imaging more flexible, and we're teasing you with drawings of dragonflies breaking from chains and flying to blue skies. Goodbye, workstation. Hello, freedom. Well, what we're going to talk about today is a new way to run Dragonfly. And we think this really creates a pattern for users that allows Dragonfly to meet them where they need to be, to enable scientific image processing with the freedom to work where you want, when you work. It's instructive to sort of look at how scientific imaging resources get allocated to sort of set up what it is we're interested in how we want to bring you this new freedom. And when I say allocation of scientific resources, I'm talking about the idea of what happens when a research group or a university or an instrument facility decides they're going to offer software for use. So initially, there's an investment in a workstation and a software license. It usually starts small, one at a time. There's an initial investment in some hardware and software. And this goes in the lab or maybe in a designated computer room, somewhere likely that it can be accessed by multiple users. This establishes the scientific image processing productivity for one scientist at a time. Now, before long, if you have high productivity out of your instrument, you're going to outgrow these resources. You're going to have multiple scientists that need to process their data and access it. So one scientist at a time will quickly get outstripped. Now, the next step is to buy a second workstation or maybe a third workstation. So that becomes 3 workstations, 3 software licenses. The Viz PC tucked away in the lab now becomes the VizLab or some data analysis suite, supporting a small group of imaging scientists that can work multiple users at one time. And so here's a picture from the closest VizLab I could grab, I could find close to me in Denver. Now, invariably, these VizLabs are tucked away in some place where the university or the facility has room, some remote destination. Here in this photograph, you can see the data analysis suite. This is in the hallway. Here's the escape hatch. This is in the basement. How often is that the case? And here's where you go if you need to go up for some air and see some sunlight. So you've got this data analysis suite, and this is where you get your scientific image processing done. So it's not your office, it's not your preferred workspace, it's just some common area maintained by others, shared with others, and if we zoom in on this picture, it's in use by others. So we feel the pain of users having to go and seek out the workstation where they want to do their scientific image processing. They have to battle a schedule of when are other people using it, they have to work on the site where the facility is provided. And we think there's a better way. So is the VizLab really the best solution? So there are obvious pain points. Maybe there are 3 or 4 computers in the lab and you want to work now, but everything is booked by other workers. Or maybe your data is on one workstation, but only the other workstation is available. You see these situations all the time. Or somebody's upgraded the software you need on one workstation only, but not the workstations that are available. You want to work in the convenience of your office rather than some common space. So that's why I raised the question, is the VizLab really the best solution? Now, we've learned a few lessons from the pandemic. First is that scientists can be highly productive when working remotely. And a number of people have had and interacted with us and said, can I move my Dragonfly license? I need to access it away from where we have been using it because that facility is locked down, or I need a temporary solution to enable remote use. So we understand that the Viz PC in the VizLab is not always your first choice location. So our point here is that scientific imaging doesn't have to be this inconvenient. It doesn't have to be inconvenient at all. So we want you to escape the VizLab. We don't want you to be chained to those workstations in the basement. We want Dragonfly to meet you where you are. We want you to work where you want, when you want. So let's leave the VizLab behind and let's take Dragonfly where you are. So maybe you want to access it when you're on the microscope or the X-ray microscope. More than likely, you want to find your space where you're productive and you can get work done. That may be on your own, that may be sitting with your advisor or meeting with colleagues. You shouldn't have to tuck away in some narrow space and access that workstation. And you should have the flexibility to work anywhere you can be productive. And so that's what we're talking about today. And so the product or the use case of pattern for using Dragonfly that we're announcing today is called Dragonfly VizServer. The idea is to give you this freedom to work where you want. Now, we've been delivering and providing Dragonfly Workstation, or what we've been calling Dragonfly, but from now on, I'll call it Dragonfly Workstation, as a solution for a number of years now. The new pattern for Dragonfly VizServer is to have Dragonfly installed and maintained in a centralized location. So this can be in your IT facility on premises, or it can be cloud-based, and then allow users to access and run Dragonfly wherever they need to be remotely. So this can be in their office with whatever workstation or computer they have, or whatever laptop they're issued, or maybe even their bring your own laptop, their MacBook, their Chromebook, or it can be a large display Windows workstation. The idea is the freedom to get the work done where you want. And the solution is to manage Dragonfly resources on centralized location with centralized maintenance. So I'll just tell you briefly how Dragonfly VizServer works, or what the behavior is, so you can understand how this pattern of remote use can work and be deployed in a typical environment. So suppose we have a number of scientists and a number of computers they can sit down and work at their facility, and then we have Dragonfly installed and we have VizServer configured. Well, Alice comes along and she's ready to start her day. And what she does is she has Dragonfly VizServer configured and installed on her computer. So she positions her mouse on the Dragonfly launcher and launches. What happens more or less automatically behind the scenes is it goes to the Dragonfly VizServer service, and the Dragonfly VizServer service looks and says, do we have any available computers ready for Alice to use? It finds one, it establishes a connection for Alice. All this happens in a matter of seconds. Alice doesn't see anything until all of a sudden the splash screen for Dragonfly shows up. So just like launching Word or Excel or PowerPoint or Dragonfly Workstation, you click the button, and then a moment later, you see the splash screen. And then before you know it, you're processing data. So this is the establishment, the connection. You don't have to think about remote desktops. You don't have to think about, do I need to check on the availability of computer 1 or computer 2 or computer 27? The Dragonfly VizServer takes care of that for you. Now, Alice is happily working. Bob comes down and sits at his desk, and he's ready to start his day, and he goes through the same process. The VizServer finds a computer and establishes a connection. And Charlie's a late riser. Charlie comes in and repeats the process. So you distribute your central resources available throughout the organization. So whether you're sitting at your desk, or whether you're sitting in a conference room or sitting in the lab, you can get work done. Now, the situation can evolve, and maybe Alice has gotten a lot of work done and she wants to bring this attention to the members of her group at group meeting, or maybe she wants to sit down with an advisor. So Alice sits down at another computer, and on this computer, when Alice launches Dragonfly, what will happen is it says, oh, Alice, you have a session open. Let me reconnect you to that session. This means that maybe you're able to interact and get feedback from other users, or maybe you launched an intensive compute job that you knew was going to take 5 or 6 hours, and now you're at a different site and you want to check in. Maybe you've gone home for the night, and you want to check in on that compute job and see if the results are ready. So Dragonfly VizServer gives you this capability of session continuation, so that you can check in on your jobs, so that you can move from work site to work site, maybe from the microscope to the office to the group room, however you want to use it. That's the idea of Dragonfly VizServer. So we really think this creates value for scientists and engineers by first giving them a better user experience. So users can access their data remotely without needing to worry about the compute power where they happen to be sitting. I may be at sitting in front of a Chromebook or a MacBook Air without much power. but I'm going to have my data centralized and localized with the VizServer, and I'm going to be able to sit and do my work and not need to worry about compute power or data location. The user gets the same graphical user experience regardless of what site they're connecting from. So you're going to have uniform data access across the organization, whether you're sitting at the microscope or sitting in your office. You'll have the uniform access to your preferences. So whether you happen to be connected to computer 1 or computer 7, whenever you save your preferences, you're going to have the same Dragonfly experience. And part of that same Dragonfly experience means you have the same product version or release. So as long as you're using VizServer and you're maintaining the software, then that means instead of having 12 or 13 computers around the site, each one is updated and maintained separately. You maintain it only at the VizServer site, and everyone's always on the latest release. This is bring your own device friendly, which means students can take advantage of their own MacBooks or their own Chromebooks. You don't have to rely on having some dedicated workstation or computer to use the software. You're instead using the centralized resources of the VizServer, which are shared use facility. And then finally, session continuation is going to make you more productive. You can check in on the work without having to wait till you get back to the office the next day. You just can allow the work to follow you wherever you go. So it creates a better user experience. Ultimately, you're able to save on hardware budget. Users don't need expensive workstations to work on their data anymore. So the users are able to access the server centralized resources. So it eliminates the need to replicate and have multiple high-powered workstations. So if you have a user base of 20 or 30 users, you don't have to put 20 or 30 workstations. You just anticipate what the average use load is, 4 or 10 users at a time, and you create that many compute nodes in the VizServer array that's able to serve those 20 to 30 users on demand when they need it. So a single server means there's less maintenance and upgrades compared to multiple workstations. The server resources can actually be split between groups or split into performance pools. So maybe you want to take advantage of having a high memory server pool for demanding image processing, or a high GPU compute pool for deep learning applications. Or, and this was quite interesting to us, multiple of our early adopters of VizServer said they want to make Dragonfly accessible not to the image analyst, but to the collaborating scientist who really can benefit from seeing the data. People who are not going to be doing processing, but can benefit from 3D visualization and slice visualization. So you might create a pool of resources of low GPU, low CPU capacity for visualization and inspection restricted, where you're not doing any deep learning and you're not doing any processing. So you can budget your hardware appropriately. In the end, this means lower IT maintenance. It's so easy to add and remove users. If you have a new scientist or engineer joining the team, you just update that person's user account profile to grant them permission to the VizServer. So there's no hardware provisioning required. There's no software installation or setup. Their user now has permission to access the VizServer. It means the IT team only has one place to deal with software updates. They run the update once on a reference image rather than on dozens of different workstations. And it's one place to manage the hardware. So updated data server hardware is going to benefit everyone. When they do CPU and GPU and memory upgrades in one place, it benefits the whole group of users. And you have, anytime they do network maintenance or update the network pipe, it's going to benefit everyone. It means they can also scale up by adding more nodes directly to the server pool. And there's nothing to update for the individual users. It's transparent for the user. You just have either faster computers or more of them. So this creates freedom and flexibility. You can sit anywhere, you can work anytime, and you have the advantages over some other simple remote use solutions of this ease of use pattern with dedicated load balancing to hand you the workstation that's available and the session continuity that I've already described before. I want to further mention that Dragonfly VizServer is just one pillar of our enterprise solution family. So we know the experience of Dragonfly Workstation. We bring to that the Dragonfly VizServer as the pillar of visualization. We've introduced before and given a recent update on the data or Dragonfly Project Organizer to manage your data. And we've made some mention of a beta release, and we'll have some updates soon on the Dragonfly Compute Framework. This enterprise family allows organizations that have high image processing demand to be able to scale up their resources and use them intelligently across an organization where users can access remotely and have the benefit of centralized managed access to data, to visualization, and to compute capacity. Now, you'll probably already see the obvious use case. As we've described before, you have just a computer lab and you want to replace it so you can access it everywhere. You can generalize or you can drill down on specific different use cases. So obviously, if you have a collaborative research group that maybe involves multiple PIs and dozens of students and postdocs and trainees, or even if it's just multiple research groups inside a commercial institute, this gives you the ability to share resources, your data resources, your visualization, and your compute capacity resources, even across campuses if you want to set up your network as such. It has a clear use case in university and industry multi-user core facilities. So this allows you to manage and provide access to a community license pool for your user base, which is something that core facilities are already in the business of doing. But why invest on high performance instrumentation only to have the image consumption and the analysis confined to specialists working at restricted locations? We think it's far better to share the interactive visualization with the scientists and engineers on their own turf. Let Dragonfly meet them where they want to do their work. Finally, I'll just mention as a use case, services labs and demo labs. You can now give clients access to data in a much better way to drive higher value for your services. Now, with Dragonfly VizServer, end users can interact with their data without needing to upgrade their workstations, without needing to manage their software licenses or deal with installers, and they don't even have to bother with downloading the data. They establish a connection and the data is there and they can open it and process it. Now, we're almost done with the presentation. I'm going to go through a couple more slides and then I'm going to go through some questions. So I think the last topic here is flexibility and scalability. So this works with homogeneous or heterogeneous server pools. So if you want every Dragonfly instance to be the same so that everyone's getting a uniform experience, that's fine. If you have a strategic deployment where you want to have multiple tiers of pools or even one heterogeneous pool, that's fine as well. It's highly flexible in that you can have dynamic addition and subtraction of compute resources from the server pools. So as hardware in your institute becomes freed up because it was being tasked with something else, or maybe now it needs to be tasked with compute jobs to serve someone else, those resources can be reallocated and the user experience for the end user is exactly the same. They click and if a server is available, then they get their Dragonfly session right away. We'll also mention more as an IT detail that it works with bare metal deployments or virtualization, and you have options to use for your hypervisor. So it creates a solution and an environment that not only gives you the freedom and the flexibility, but gives your IT and management the scalability options. Now, we're not going to go through a Q&A session today. Instead, I'm going to go through a list of questions that I think are probably on a lot of people's minds to answer some things that just don't come out in the slides. I'm going to go through these questions, maybe take me 5 to 10 minutes. But if you have other questions, I encourage you to visit VizServer.com and click on Contact Sales. When you go there, our sales team will respond and deal with all of your questions on a one-on-one basis. We'll set up a seminar or webinar to discuss it with you and your site. So I'm going to start this discussion in this overview topic, and then we'll go through some questions on how it is configured and behaved for the client, and then finally how it's configured and behaves for the server. So the first question, an overview, does this change anything with Dragonfly Workstation? And the answer is no. The launch of Dragonfly VizServer will not affect the behavior or support for Dragonfly Workstation. Both products will continue to get regular updates on the same schedule. Both will have important positions in our product family. So don't worry, if you're happy with the Dragonfly Workstation license, you can keep using it, and that's a model that we will continue to support. The next question is, does VizServer have the same features as Workstation? Yes. You can use all of the same features for image segmentation, visualization, animation, analysis, etc., that you're used to in Dragonfly Workstation. The user experience with respect to feature set has no difference. It's just a different way to access and run the software. Now, everyone always asks, how much does the product cost? How much does VizServer cost? So I'll encourage you to contact sales so we can find the right solution for your group. We've got a variety of plans to meet the needs of different groups, depending on the number of users, that you need to support, your institution type, and other factors. So just reach out to sales. Someone will get back to you very quickly so we can find out how we can find a proper license and pricing plan for you. Now, I'll also entertain the question, does my non-commercial license include VizServer? So Dragonfly VizServer is not activated with a standard non-commercial license or really any license that's out there. If you want to invest in VizServer, we'll be happy to work with you. But we do have pricing plans specifically for universities and other non-commercial research institutes. So if you are a non-commercial institute, you can contact so we can contact us so we can tell you about your VizServer options. Now, the next question is, can I upgrade my existing workstation license to run VizServer? Yes, just contact sales and we'll identify a plan that lets you get the most value from your existing license or licenses as you migrate to VizServer. Can VizServer hardware be used for other software? Well, the VizServer design permits but discourages this usage. Our support team can't anticipate the computing demands and load that might be introduced by other software packages that you may wish to run on the same hardware. So the problem is this can lead to under-provisioned hardware. Maybe it was just perfect for your Dragonfly use case, but it didn't work for your numerical simulation software that you want to run on the same computer. When that happens, the user experience suffers. But ultimately, VizServer deployment does nothing to constrain what other software you want to use or anything else you want to do with your hardware. So this is certainly permissible. It's just not encouraged. So I'll go now into some questions about the client configuration and behavior, starting with what are the computer requirements for the computer where I sit to access VizServer. So there are no specific requirements other than you need a computer with a keyboard, a mouse, and a monitor, and of course a network connection. Any mouse with a scroll wheel and any monitor with a resolution of 1920 by 1080 or higher is what's recommended. In fact, you can omit both of those and still use Dragonfly, but those are both strongly encouraged. The computer you use to connect can have any of the major operating systems such as Windows, Linux, macOS, or Chrome, or you can have, under some configurations, you can connect directly inside a web browser. Now, that web browser is going to be a different experience than just clicking on an icon on your desktop to launch the software. So the user experience does vary from one client platform to another. Not all the features discussed today are available from all client platforms, but just contact us and we'll tell you what sort of configurations we can support and give you the behavior you need. The next question is, do I have to be in the same room or building or city where the VizServer is hosted? And the answer is no. Network performance is often characterized by latency. So that's the delay that occurs between the time a computer sends a message and the other computer receives the message. And it can be measured in milliseconds. And then network performance is also measured in bandwidth, which is how much data can be sent per unit time. So there'll be like megabits per second. All you need for VizServer to have a good behavior and performance is a low latency network connection between you and the VizServer host. I routinely connect to a Montreal VizServer from my home office in Denver. I've connected from hotels in the UK and Germany to the same Montreal VizServer to get work done when I'm on the road. Everything has worked well, but my colleague who's working from his home office in Cape Town, South Africa, doesn't have the same network performance at that site. So you can test, but as long as you have a low latency network connection, you're going to be fine. And so this means you can use it certainly on the same campus and even across cities or even across continents when required. Will VizServer let me load or save data from the computer where I'm sitting? Now, I raised that question because I mentioned that you have access to all of the same data when you use Project Organizer, and so you're able to work on the same data from one session to another. So the answer is yes. If you don't want to use Organizer and you want to work with data that's on the computer where you're sitting, then there's not a restriction against that. So VizServer is designed to have a better experience when used with Organizer, but you can open and save files directly from the client computer where you're working. But you do have to wait because those data have to travel across the internet, and the performance here depends on your network bandwidth. So for normal interactivity with Dragonfly VizServer, as I mentioned, it's critical for low network latency. Here, if you're going to do this behavior, then you have to start to consider network bandwidth. What happens when all the VizServer nodes are already in use? Well, if a user attempts to connect at a time when all the server nodes are in use, he or she will get a message indicating that everything is in use, and then the user can just try again later. So it's just a matter of having restricted resources. So now I'll go on to these last batch of questions about server configuration and behavior. So the first question I ask is, do I host the VizServer at my site, or does ORS host my VizServer, or do I run it on the cloud? Well, ORS is not currently hosting a VizServer service for users. So for now, Dragonfly VizServer is designed to be hosted and administered by the customer. But customers may choose to host VizServer on premises hardware or on public cloud resources. So the most often configuration that we're seeing customers adopt is on premises. How is VizServer different from Dragonfly Cloud? Well, we did offer a Dragonfly Cloud product in the past, and we've learned a lot from it. We've improved the user experience. We've built expertise in how to administer the solution with locally managed resources. So VizServer introduces session continuation and automatic load balancing, which were never part of Dragonfly Cloud. The product that was formerly sold as Dragonfly Cloud has now been integrated into Dragonfly VizServer. So customers who purchase VizServer can choose to deploy either on-premises or on public cloud resources. What are the hardware requirements for VizServer? Well, it depends on your typical analysis and processing needs. So the memory and CPU capacity that you equip your VizServer with will depend on your specific needs. Now, we have users who are setting up Dragonfly with as little as 32 gigabytes of RAM and as much as 512 gigabytes of RAM. So it all depends, and we'll work with you to advise you. I will mention that every instance in your VizServer array of server nodes does require a workstation class or a data center class GPU from NVIDIA. And that's because the consumer class NVIDIA GeForce are not compatible with Dragonfly VizServer, and the GPUs from AMD and Intel are not suitable for deep learning. So that's it for the hardware in the VizServer. The next question, will ORS sell me hardware for VizServer? Well, ORS will provide guidance on hardware specifications, but customers are advised to purchase their VizServer hardware from vendors they already work with and trust. If you already have an IT department managing your hardware, go with them and find out where they like to buy their hardware, because they've already invested in finding someone that has good local support and can take care of your hardware investment. Can I repurpose my current Dragonfly hardware for VizServer? Yes, but you may have to upgrade your operating system. Your Dragonfly Workstation will run on Linux or Windows Home or Windows Pro or Windows Server, but Dragonfly Workstation requires Windows Server. Note that you will also need, as I mentioned earlier, Workstation class or Data Center class NVIDIA GPUs. Can I use VizServer if I have only one server node? Yes, we can help you configure VizServer so that you can have the freedom and flexibility to access your dedicated hardware available remotely, even if your deployment's for just one user at a time. You'll still have the convenience of being able to move from site to site or connect from wherever you happen to be for the day. Another question we hear is, can I use my university's high-performance computing or HPC cluster for VizServer? Well, it depends on how your university manages its HPC resources. If they have suitable hardware and operating system configurations, then it will be possible. It will require some discussion with you and your IT department and the ORS VizServer support team. Another IT-related question is, does VizServer rely on virtualization? The answer is it's not required, so no, it doesn't depend on it, but there are multiple configurations that do rely on that can use virtualization. So Dragonfly VizServer deployments can work on bare metal systems, virtualized systems, or even a combination of both. And then the final question is, do I need a dedicated system administrator? Well, the VizServer support team will help you configure and deploy your VizServer platform, but you would benefit if you're able to include colleagues with IT experience, especially when it comes to integrating within your existing IT resources and framework. So we'll work with you, but there will be pain points if you don't have IT experience. So let us help you in any way we can. That's it for the questions. That's it for the presentation. I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to let you know that we're eager to work with you and answer your questions. You can visit VizServer.com right now and click on Contact Sales, and we'll be in touch right away and tell you how we can make the freedom and flexibility of Dragonfly VizServer work at your site so you can scale up and enjoy those new benefits. Thank you all for your time. I wish you all a wonderful afternoon, evening, or morning, wherever you are. Take care, and I'll look forward to seeing you again later. Bye-bye.